When we set out to design our headquarters, it was important to us that we not only work with the most excellent team at S9 Architecture in New York and Vocon locally, who could deliver the very best design, but who also understood that our vision was to build something that was more than just a building. This building, like the foundation, is a platform for possibilities. And now we're opening our doors to new relationships, new partnerships, new ideas, new investments, and new ways of working together as a community. This is the reason why we chose to work with Pascale Sablan, who will join me in a conversation this year as the Sally and Bob Gries Keynote lecturer. Pascale is a trailblazer, and she has dedicated her career to making the built environment more equitable and just. Pascale is the global president of NOMA, the National Organization of Minority Architects, and the 5th woman to hold the position in the organization's 52-year history. She is also the founder of Beyond the Built Environment, a nonprofit that celebrates the contributions of diverse designers and advocates for equitable communities. Among her many accomplishments, Pascale is the 2021 AIA Whitney Young Award recipient, becoming the youngest African-American architect to join the College of Fellows. And she is only the 315th licensed Black female architect in the US. She is breaking barriers, inspiring the next generation, and she is one of the most influential architects of our lifetime. Now please join me in welcoming Pascale Sablan to the stage. Welcome, Pascal.
Happy to be here.
I have to say, it's been one of the greatest honors of my lifetime to work with Pascale over the last 5 years and to get to know her. I think you're in for a real treat today about her journey and what she's been able to accomplish as such a young architect here. So we're going to open with a few questions, and we'd like Pascale to start by telling you how she is both an architect and an activist. Tell us about your journey. It's a really extraordinary journey becoming an architect, and how that brought you to the profession.
Thank you so much, Lillian, and thank you all for being here. So for me, I was always an artist as a kid. I was commissioned to do a mural at the Palmanac Community Center when I was 12 years old. And as I'm drawing this jungle gym with a multifaceted community, a passerby says, "Wow, you can draw straight lines without a ruler. That's a cool skill for an architect to have." And if this stranger had not had this out loud thought, really, I'm not sure when architecture or the design profession would have ever been offered to me as a pathway. So anyone who's ever known me will have told you that any time anyone asked me what I was going to be, the answer was always an architect. So I was intentional about going to Pratt Institute that had a 5-year bachelor's degree, because then finally, after 6 years of impatiently waiting, I can begin to study the profession that I knew was destined to be my future. And within the first or second week of school, in an architecture history class, a professor asked 2 of us to stand. And when we did, we thought we're being, volunteered to lead an activity or a program. And he said, "Okay, these 2 will never become architects because they're Black and because they're women." Now, this surprised me that a professor who didn't know my name nor my capacity could make such a strong proclamation about my intention and my capabilities. It was also shocking to understand in a classroom of 60 students that there was only 2 Black women in the space. And I was also saddened by the silence of my peers. But that's also the moment where I received my purpose. I knew when I walked into the space, I was representing way more than Pascale, right? I was representing my gender, my race, my ethnicity, those with curly hair. I was representing it all. And that weight and that responsibility, knowing that my actions and how I perform was supposed to multiply the opportunities that are afforded to me and not limit for the other. And so when I think about that weight, when I think about that responsibility, that's why I knew when I came into the architecture profession, I cannot just draw buildings and amazing projects, but I also needed to transform the profession as well. It's important that when I tell that story, a lot of you are shocked, but I've asked audiences to stand if they have ever been told that they're inadequate because of those things, and people are standing in schools of architecture, in professional settings, in lectures, and what you're seeing on your screen here is actually me asking an audience in Cleveland, Ohio to stand if they've ever been told. So this is systematic. My girl. Thank you for persevering. But this is systematic. This is part of the narrative. And as we fight, especially in architecture, to have a more diverse and inclusive profession, we need to understand where are these roadblocks, these obstacles. And part of my path and my journey is to eradicate racism, sexism, and all forms of oppression from the profession and the built environment. And I thank you, Lillian, and the Cleveland Foundation for your leadership in allowing me to do so in this project.
In addition to being an architect, Pascale has stepped up to lead, including creating her own nonprofit called Beyond the Built Environment. Can you talk about the organization and why you created it?
Sure. So the mission behind Beyond the Built Environment is to elevate the work and identities of women and people of color in the profession, while letting the community know their important role in designing and deciding their built environment and experience. So together with programs such as Say It Loud, we have exhibitions, which is a traveling activation that elevates the work of local heroes. So every time we have a new exhibition, and we're working on our 38th one right now, we elevate those work and identities, and we have that all kind of have a repository in the Great Diverse Designers Library. Now you're saying, wow, Pascale, great, that's a strong word. Yes, it is. Because when we Google the words great architect, Google banner comes up with 50 names and faces that start from contemporary, currently practicing architects, all the way to Raphael and Michelangelo. And how many are women? 1. So are we saying there's only been one important woman in the field of architecture between now and when Architects with Ninja Turtles? Absolutely not. So with all these exhibitions, everyone who's ever been elevated is now in the Great Diverse Designers Library, and their bios begin as such. We are fighting that SEO with every single exhibition and each profile indicated. And in this moment, we're at 972 diverse designers featuring 70% of the US and 10% of the global world. And so what we've done with this exhibition is really transform not just having gallery spaces, but accessible spaces where the community can engage. And some of the images you're seeing here is also local to Ohio. And that's important because really we're talking about the pipeline. You can't be what you don't see. And to see people in your community that go, wait, I know that project impacts me every day, and can see yourself reflected in the identity of those designers, and can go to their lectures, or can come visit them at their headquarters, or be able to go see them speak. This is all important, tangible ways of connecting future leaders with local heroes, and that's part of that mission.
Thank you. One of the reasons why also we selected Pascale and wanted to work with her is because she has been championing an idea of design justice. And talk about what that looks like in practice and why it's important to the work you do.
Sure. So before I can convince you about design justice, I have to talk about what design injustice can look like, right? Our environments impact who we are and how we function. It tells us stories, it gives us very strong and clear messages, from bright orange spaces that says get up and go, to blue and green tranquil spaces that says relax and take a deep breath, right? So an example of that is Robert Moses. Robert Moses, in my education, was heralded as a prolific person who really transformed New York. And what I did not know, what my education failed to tell me, is that he was an avid racist. Not just against people of color, but immigrants. We were all considered undesirables. And while he was developing Jones Beach, he did not want us to go to his prestige Jones Beach. So he made sure that all of the overpass bridges on the Southern State Parkway was 9 feet or shorter. Why? Because he knew that our main mode of transportation at that time was buses. And so we have over 20 overpass bridges that is the manifestation of his racist ideals. And so these are moments where it's not necessarily obvious that there's messaging within our built environment, but it's there. It's there in statues, heralding at the highest peak of communities of people who fought vehemently to maintain slavery and oppression. It's there in typologies that imprison and maintain the slavery pipeline. It's in many aspects. And so when we talk about design justice, it's about architecture that heals, that acknowledges history, that embeds culture, that apologizes in a tactile, meaningful way. And so we think about projects that tell stories that sometimes we're uncomfortable with, but is the reality of our history and part of our identity of how we sit and stand before you together. And so why that's really important, because it's not just the beautiful structure at the end that we take really good selfies with, but it's the process in which we do it. It's how we teach, it's how we engage, it's the people we engage in that process that's quite important and critical in how we share that story and realize justice. Because it's not designing for people, it's designing with people. And making sure that their voices is not just at 1 or 2 community meetings with some cold pizza and some flat soda, but throughout the entire process. And in those spaces, their voices are valued, are echoed, are protected. And the responsibility of all of us collectively around the table of decision makers are heralding what they're telling us and pushing that forward as we make decisions for the project.
So since sometimes it's hard to see this in a finished building, talk about the process here in Cleveland and how your work to help us radically rethink the program of the Cleveland Foundation manifested itself in really the values of how we really work together to create this building.
First, it began with connecting with the employees, with the staff, understanding how they work, how they want to work, and what their aspirations are as team building. Then it was also the community. Who the client is beyond who cuts the check. It's everyone impacted by the project. And really making sure that our approach really diversified who the important voices are and expanded the definition of what a stakeholder is and what it means. Across platforms, across the community, across ages, abilities, educational levels is all important. Your voice, your presence, your interaction with this project is important. And through that, we developed together our project, right? This amazing project that had program and spaces really that is for the community, that kneels to the community and says, this is for you. The project is extremely contextual and sited on this site. If we moved it a whole block over, the project would have to have a different design. Because this site has history that is manifested. The material selection is part of that work. And when we engage the community, especially the tech hive is actually very much that stays with me, is that we had a moment of vulnerability, where we not just talked about what we were excited about, but also what were our fears. What were the hesitations? And that level of trust and vulnerability cannot be pushed aside for a different color choice. It's important that we kept that as our mission in terms of how we make the decisions. And as an activist architect, it was powerful to have a partner in the Cleveland Foundation who already understood the mission, who are activists and advocates as well. And so together, we revolutionized the way we do architecture, and we offered that to the Huff community, to the Cleveland community, and to the global community on how we can do work that really expands that. And with doing that work and to hearing those voices, the level of accountability and our reputation to the community is important, because that also is part of that healing process. Not everything that was asked for was manifested, but it was circled back. Here's what we heard. Did we hear that correctly? Here's why we can or why we cannot do this. And that is important to, again, continue that action of actionability and showing up for people in the way that they need to and how it's healing. And so I'm really proud of our process and even floored by the ultimate event of how our project have come together.
Thank you. In addition, Pascale gave of her time, incredible amounts of time, beyond even the scope sometimes. And she spent time with the Huff Youth Advisory Council and really inspired them to think about the neighborhood as a whole and their own potential leadership in designing our city. And so talk a little bit about what that meant to you to work with the youth.
So I think it was, thank you for the very generous words, but I think we really inspired one another, right? And when we talk about stakeholders and who our leaders are, students and youth is absolutely part of that equation. And I was inspired to see how passionate, brilliant, and talented the youth is in your community and how lucky you all have that as your trajectory. And what was powerful for me is that I was very honest. I talked about the challenges, I talked about the skill sets, I talked about the strategies of becoming an architect, designer and planner, but really I emphasized architect, I'm not gonna lie. But really pushing the idea for them to understand that. And they take on that mantle and talk about how they wanna manifest those changes in their everyday lives. So again, as we talk about community and we talk about engagement, it's really about meeting everyone at those capacities and really thinking about the youth as part of that aspect. So volunteering and having engagement with youth is really a blessing for me and something that I also always aspire to do because it has such a prolific impact. Ron was talking about, the programs that he had put forward through the support of you all and seeing that come back to him in time of need, right? You never know the seeds you're planting today. Oh, the beautiful trees that are soaring to great heights tomorrow. And it's not always about knowing what the impact will be, but moving with intention, moving with vulnerability and honesty as we create and impact people, because we never know how strong our impact are to people.
Thank you. Talk about what it means to be the 315th licensed Black female architect in America. And the 5th woman to serve as the president of NOMA, which is the National Organization of Minority Architects. And in addition, Pascale is a mother with a young child. So how do you hope your leadership for the field and for the world will impact the next generation?
For me, it began with self-love and really identifying. I always kind of leaned and hid behind the ambiguity of my name, Pascal. And really, quite recently in 2020, reconciled my identity and stopped hiding behind that. I altered my bio so that is the first sentence. If there's anything about that first sentence that does not sit well with you, do not continue to read. We do not need to hang out. I also point out that I'm the 5th woman president of NOMA because it is literally an organization founded to seek justice. And so it's to say that all organizations have an opportunity and a need to grow and to be better, that we all have biases within that work, so then how do we start to dismantle that on all levels? And so first was stepping forward with my identity, making that be part of my handshake. It was also allowing my hair to be poofy and curly sometimes, that it doesn't necessarily need to subscribe to flat iron, pressed and permed hairs that subscribe to that European idea of beauty. That me, as I am, is beautiful. Once I realized that, I was able to be more present and more full. So I didn't have to leave parts of myself at the door when I came into a boardroom, when I came into an architecture firm, when I came into an advocacy space. And instead chose to bring as much as me forward as possible. So my son, poor Xavier, comes to me to board meetings, panel discussions. He does all the hand gestures. It's very quite funny. And he said that he's going to be a NOMA architect when he grows up. And so that's what I shared on the screen here is a picture of him sitting at a 8-hour board meeting talking about with the other anchor institutions of architecture about really creating DEI in this space. And it's important that people see me in that way. And when I left, one of the women said, wow, Pascal, you coming with your son made me know that I can actually have a family and be a leader. And so again, sometimes just being me allows me to send a message and echo something that is quite important that resonates with others. And that's important. And I also understand as a leader that it is not about my personal experience only. That I represent thousands of people in the various hats that I wear. And so when I make moves or make decisions, it's impacting a lot of people. So it must be carefully considered, but it also must be an echoing voice that I'm hearing from those that I serve as well. So moving with intention, with integrity is quite important to me, and making sure that I'm very careful to ensure that I understand the important information, that that I'm generous with the information that I have, and share those resources so that we can move together. My leadership style is not to live in the mindset of scarcity, that there's only one seat at the table, or that there's even one table, but that we live gloriously in a place of abundance. Ooh! Ooh! Removing all shackles that hold us down and elevating one another, and just imagine the power, the space, the world we create together, equally. Thank you.
So to close, one final question. How might the work that you did in Cleveland, reflect a little bit on the work here in Cleveland and the future of cities, and what lessons we've learned together, but that we think really apply to the future of cities?
First, I think Naveed Makami, who was our leader in this process, and the kind of grace and power that he gave me to kind of come forth and bring that kind of level of engagement and our process in the project. And although I love the global impact and world domination, I'm also quite proud of the local impact and imprint that it has made as well. Using the lens of design justice, of a project that heals, not just through words and banners and posters, but through spaces, square footages, transparency, glass, right? When we talked to the community and asked about what they wanted to see, they wanted to see themselves. They wanted to feel welcomed. They wanted to know that this was for them as well. They also had really great programs established and didn't want to overshadow those things, but identified the gaps that was needed and necessary for the project to fill. So with that work, that sculpted the decisions and the ground floor most exclusively, but also even the materials, the wood, that says warmth, that says nature, that says sustainability, that says, touch me, we're here. We wanted to make sure that it's applied for not just, again, working for people, but with people in a way where they feel that their voices are being heard and respected. And we're also always expanding the idea of who our clients, our stakeholders, and our community means. Because sometimes there's identities and challenges that I don't identify and don't even see and understand and perceive. So having a diverse group of professionals and students and community members as part of the table really brings as much insight as possible. And through all things, architecture can make amazing things happen, as long as we know about them. So for me, this project is catalytic. This is an amazing thank you moment to allowing what I've been advocating for and pounding the podiums about, to have it manifested in a real tangible way. And to show and to hear the love that the community has given to the project, because it has realized a lot of the promises I've made, we made together, is also quite important. I am excited to continue to engage the community, because that doesn't just happen during the design process or during construction, but it's through the life of the project as well. And so we need to always have an ongoing dialogue, because architecture, when you're looking at plans, sections, elevations, it is a specific language that only a few of us speak. And when you don't speak a language, it's very hard for you to participate in the conversation. So we want to make sure that our architecture is the Rosetta Stone that tells that story, that speaks to those histories and those legacies, that manifests Huff and the community of Midtown. And you see it, you feel it, you are in love with it because you see yourself, and it manifests even more self-love in this amazing community.
Thank you. So thank you, Pascal. I'm going to ask you to thank her again for both this conversation, but for what she's done for us and for our community, and for a lifelong friend and partner to Cleveland. So join me in giving Pascal a round of applause.